Asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityurma amritam gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Om. Peace, peace, peace. It's wonderful to be back here. Some known faces. In spite of the masks, I can recognize some of you. And New York, we have a small gathering once in a while because of the pandemic. I've gotten into the habit of saying some known masks. I can see some familiar masks. So today, just a little while ago, we had a memorial to Stephen Berg, who was a long-time devotee and associated with the Santa Barbara convent. It was a very moving memorial service. I think many of you attended it. In New York, we suffered a loss yesterday. Frieder was close to our center, and his wife, Susan Sam, she has been close to the Vedanta Society here and in New York, especially in New York, since the 1970s, early 70s. So he passed in Vienna, Austria, yesterday. A wonderful couple. They lived a life of art. She is an internationally known cello player. She plays with the quartet. And he was an excellent painter. So they had this wonderful apartment at the very top of one of the tall buildings in Manhattan. And it had this remarkable light. I remember, I've never seen light like that. They chose it because of that, because of Frieder's painting. It's like a kind of golden luminosity, you know. And I guess it was not very comfortable up there. I think they chose it because she could practice her music and he could paint, and they would not be bothered by neighbors. Yeah. And so they lived this life, this wonderful life, for decades. I met him only a few times. I still remember I'd gone to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and he told me something that said, no, Swami, that's not the way. You go and visit the Metropolitan Museum of Art and go around and see them paintings. He said, if you were to visit your best friends, would you visit 100 at a time? So that's ridiculous. You would visit one and sit with him for some time. And that's how you appreciate art, how you immerse yourself in art. Go and sit there with one or two of your best friends. So death is ever present, and therefore the question of death, the problem of death, is ever present. And that's what religion and spirituality is, I was just thinking about it, that the entire project of spirituality, whether in the East and the West, and certainly in the East, in India, has been a 5,000-year story of the quest for immortality. You can see it that way, actually, very easily. When Swami Vivekananda came to this country, often he would introduce Vedanta with one very stirring quote from the Upanishads. Shrinvantu vishve amritasya putraha. Listen, ye children of immortal bliss. Shrinvantu vishve amritasya putraha. Aye dhamani divyani tastu. Even those who live on higher planes, gods who live in heavens, you listen to me also, the sage says. We do not know from whom this poetry first came. It's very ancient. He says, even the gods do not know what I'm going to speak about, what to speak of mortal man. What should we listen? What is the message? Vedaham Purusham Mahantam. I have realized that infinite being. I have realized that infinite being. I have known that infinite being. What kind of infinite being? It says, Aditya Varnam Tamasah Parastat. Blazing forth like the sun. Not with the material light, like the sun there, but blazing forth with that glory, but not with the material light, with the light of consciousness. Aditya Varnam, Tamasah Parastat, forever beyond darkness, beyond the darkness of death. Alright, suppose such a thing is there and you can know it. What is the use of it? What do we get out of this? Tameva viditva ati mrityumeti. By realizing that, by knowing that, one goes beyond death. One goes beyond death. One overcomes death. One solves the problem of death. Any other way? You can upload your consciousness to the cloud or something like that, get a robot, cybernetic body. And I'm not being humorous. I'll tell you why in a while. Some way, prolong your life. Store your body in a cryogenic container or something like that. Science fiction, or almost science fact now. Can you do that? Can you become immortal that way? Nanyah pantha vidyate ayanaya. There is no other path to immortality. Everything else has a limit. There is only this way, that there is this infinite reality. And it is forever beyond death. And when you know it, mortal man, the mortal becomes the immortal. You go beyond death. I think that really encapsulates the message of not only Vedanta, but all of spirituality. That's one way of looking at it, and it's a major way of looking at spirituality, what spirituality is all about. Recently, just last month, I had this offer from Hollywood. They wrote to me, Swami, how would you like to be on a show with Captain Kirk, with William Shatner? I said, of course. As kids in India, we grew up, at that time, there were only 2 American shows on TV. There was only one channel. And there were only 2 American shows on TV. Star Trek and I Love Lucy. So every Sunday I would wait for the Star Trek. I don't know when was I Love Lucy. That also I would. I think it was on Friday or something. And of course Captain Kirk. I didn't know that he was still acting. I didn't actually know that he was still around. And then I looked him up. He's been acting since 1951. And he's still acting. And so it's this for this History Channel show. He's hosting it. And the subject is immortality. Yogis and immortality. The search, the quest for overcoming death, for going beyond death. I was thinking, I told the producer that you right there in William Shatner, you have somebody who has a secret of immortality. I mean, if he's been acting since 1951, he's 90 now, going by the Wikipedia page. And he's still very active. So there you have it. And I agreed, of course, to this thing. And then they came and they had questions. They interviewed me for more than 1.5 hours. And the question is that how do we live longer? That was the basic idea. We come across stories and even authentic accounts of yogis living for hundreds of years. The most recent example, celebrated example, was Trailanga Swami in Benares. If you look him up, he's a very famous spiritual teacher in India. And because he was in recent history, he passed in the middle of, towards the end of the 19th century. Sri Ramakrishna met him. So he was 280 years old. And because it was in the British period, and they had multiple sources who attest to the fact that at least he lived for 2 centuries. So 280 years by most accounts. A very remarkable character, enlightened being, and I think he was there just to bless people and transmit spiritual knowledge and blessings. He was in the holy city of Benares. It's a city of Shiva. And people used to call him the walking Shiva. Sri Ramakrishna called him the walking Shiva. The Shiva walks around in Benares. His meeting with Sri Ramakrishna is also interesting. If you go to the little room where he lived, Trailanga Swami, in Benares, there is a painting on the wall which shows Sri Ramakrishna visiting Trailanga Swami. And Sri Ramakrishna is asking him to... See, the thing is, Trailanga Swami was mostly silent. He would hardly speak. So Sri Ramakrishna asks him in gestures, is it two or one, ultimate reality? And Trailanga Swami is replying, one. He was this huge man, towering, and you can see he's saying one like this. And there's a funny side to that story. I mean, I remember I was telling this story to a friend of mine, another monk, and we were at dinner in the ashram where I joined the order. This was about 24 years ago. And I was telling this other young monk the story, and we were sitting down for dinner, and I said, I was pointing, showing him by gestures, two or one. At that time, the person serving the rotis, the chapatis, was walking by, and he gave me one, and he's gone. I wanted two. But he gave me one, and there's no chance of an appeal because he has to give it to 200 people, so he's raised on ahead. And Trailanga Swami lived 280 years. So, and there are a number of other such accounts of yogis living for a long time. So how do they live for a long time? Is it worth living for a long time? What is the point in living for a long time? And you must remember, if you want to live for a long time, another way of looking at it is, do you really want to be old for a longer time? The oldest member of our Vedanta Society in New York is Bill Conrad. He's 96 this year. And he keeps saying almost every other day, he would say, oi vey, oi vey. Old age is not for sissies. The Buddha, what made the Prince Gautama into Buddha, Siddhartha into Buddha, is that he saw old age. He saw an old person and a sick person and a dead body. And so these symbolize this phase of suffering. This symbolize what is wrong with life. The deep fault lines, in California you have a fault line. The deep fault lines which run through life. Old age, disease, death. Jara, Vyadhi, Mrityu. And then he saw a monk, he saw a monk, and he wanted to know who is this monk. And he says he's given up all worldly pursuits in search of enlightenment. And then, these are the 4 sites after which he decided to go out in search of truth. And remember, his quest for truth, his quest for enlightenment was a quest to solve the problem of suffering. Not just for himself. He was not really in a lot of suffering. He was having a party. He was a prince and kept in the midst of lap of luxury. But he realized the pervasive nature of suffering, that nobody can escape suffering. He asked his charioteer, who is this strange man? Why is he bent over? Why is he tottering? Does he have wrinkles and his hair have fallen out, his teeth have fallen out? And he says, he's old. That's why. Will my father become old? Will my child become old and my wife become old? Yes, Prince, they will all become old. Will I become old? Yes, Prince, you will become old too. And then death, disease and death. Will my father die? Yes. Will one day my child, my little boy, will he die one day? Yes. And I? Yes, Prince, you too will die. So this inevitable nature of suffering, that nobody escapes it. So this put him on the trajectory towards enlightenment, the quest. His quest was not just for his own suffering or possible suffering, but for everybody, a solution to the problem of suffering, which includes old age, disease, death. So really, you want to prolong life physically in this way. This is the only way we know it. But then, if you prolong it this way, you're just being old a little longer. A doctor in Calcutta told me that, Swami, these days our medical technology is so good, we have advanced so far, that we can almost more or less ensure that you will live long, but we cannot guarantee you will live well. You'll live long, but probably not well. So these are the questions they asked in that interview, and we talked about it. So initially, yes, thousands of years back, if you go, there were practitioners who tried to prolong physical life, but they very soon realized, first of all, it is impossible, and the consequences are not always desirable. Why is it impossible? As the insight, the Buddha got this insight, that everything is impermanent. His famous insight, anityam, anityam, sarvam anityam. Impermanent, impermanent, indeed all is impermanent. Not just impermanent, it's changing fast. Kshanikam, kshanikam, sarvam kshanikam. Momentary, momentary, all is momentary. And not just that, shunyam, shunyam, sarvam shunyam. Empty, empty, all is empty. Because it is impermanent, because it is momentary, and because it is all empty, dukkham, dukkham, sarvam dukkham. Suffering, suffering, indeed all is suffering. Now, you might say, what a way to rain on our parade. But Heinrich Zimmer, the well-known Indologist, he says, the philosophies of India are not actually pessimistic. They are optimistic. They say that there is this grim picture of life, that's what they paint. A philosopher once told me, there's an ancient Sanskrit proverb, I forget the wording, but what it basically means, to the sensitive, to the thinker, all is suffering. If you're hit with a spider's web, you barely feel it. But if the eyeball is hit with even a thinnest of silk of spider's web, you feel it. Similarly, for the sensitive, for the thinker, indeed all is suffering. So the quest was, how do you overcome suffering? And Heinrich Zimmer says, if you look at all the philosophies of India, they say that it is possible to overcome suffering. It is possible to overcome old age, disease, death. It's possible to overcome death. Not in the way we might first of all think, you live longer in a physical body. That's the first thing that comes to our mind. Not in that way. The Buddha also discovered, because everything is impermanent, everything that has been put together will one day fall apart. Everything that is compounded will decay ultimately. So physical bodies have been put together, they'll fall apart. Machines fall apart, artifacts fall apart, physical bodies also will fall apart. You cannot keep it going forever. And in fact, if you try to keep it going, it can actually increase suffering. Around this time, I'm talking about thousands of years ago, across the civilizations of the world, and especially in India, they discovered that it's not just the physical body. We have what came to be known as a subtle body, sukshma sharira, a subtle body. Now, straight off the bat, subtle body is not something esoteric, something mystical. It's something very obvious. What is a subtle body? Our thoughts, feelings, emotions, memories, basically the person we think we are. When we say we are embodied, we really do not think we are literally this body. We think we are persons. All of us. We think we are persons, sort of somehow embodied in this body. A bit like software in a machine, maybe, data in a computer, something like that. So we are persons encased in a physical body. This person, this is the subtle body. And this is what they discovered. Across the civilizations of the world, at the very beginning of civilization, even before that, all the First Nations, the original tribes, they all have this knowledge that one does not perish with the destruction of the physical body. Something survives, something continues. And there you have the beginning of religion. You cannot have religion without something continuing after death. Somebody told me in New York that, oh no, afterlife it's not there in Judaism. I said, that cannot be. I don't know enough to convince you otherwise, but you have to ask your rabbi. And then later she went and asked and came back and said, no, you're right. There is a fully developed theory of afterlife and what happens there. You cannot have religion, a spirituality without a theory of afterlife. Something survives death, and that's the subtle body. You may say that, hey, wait a minute, that's still the physical body. A doctor or a scientist will tell you that's still a physical body. But that's already assuming a lot. You're already assuming what? That what you call the subtle body, thoughts, feelings, emotions, desires, the personality, that's just the brain. That's just neurons firing. When the brain dies, that's all gone. The person is gone when the brain dies. When the body is dead, burnt, buried, then the person is gone. But then you're making this big jump, this logical jump, that somehow the physical body, the brain and the nervous system produced the first person experience of being alive, of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, thinking, desiring, loving, hating. You say, so? Show me how. Show me how little bursts of electricity produce this. They are correlated. There's no doubt about it. I'm not going to go into this. It's a favorite subject of mine. It's a trap. I jump into it and we'll be there forever. It's called the hard problem of consciousness. If you Google it, David Chalmers, and she's from NYU. So David Chalmers is a leading philosopher in the mind-brain consciousness unit at the New York University. He's the one who coined the term, the hard problem of consciousness. Basic idea is, how does something physical, like the brain, generate first-person experiences? The feeling of seeing color, the experience of taste, smell, all that you see in the brain. If you scan the brain, you say brain generates it. But if you scan the brain, even with your subtlest instruments, what are you going to get? You're going to get physical processes. You're going to get arrays of neurons firing tiny bursts of electricity in the brain. How does that translate into seeing the sunlight? How does that translate into the feeling of grief at losing a beloved person? How does that translate into the feeling of remembering something, or having the feeling of it's on the tip of my tongue, I cannot recall? There are tiny bursts of electricity going on in the brain corresponding to that. All of present neuroscience of consciousness is what is called a science of correlation. What is this correlation? You report a pain, and the neuroscientist is scanning your brain and finds that certain bits of your brain somewhere is a little bit of bursts of electricity are firing. Oh, this is correlated with that. You can't yet say this produces that, or this is the cause of that, or this is basically that. You can't say. Where is the science in between? I saw this cartoon which explains the problem. A scientist is giving a talk. Step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Steps 1, 2, 3 are, mathematical equations, a lot of detail. And step 5 is again mathematics. In step 4, it's just written, miracle. And another scientist is telling him, I think you need to work on step 4. That's what's going on in neuroscience. That more and more knowledge about the nervous system, about the brain functioning, and then somehow that becomes thoughts, feelings, emotions, somehow won't do. I've spoken with people working in this field, in the cutting edge of this field, and they don't have a clue. Actually, to be honest, they don't have a clue. The best they can offer is, wait for a while, Swami. In 20 years, 30 years, we will have an answer for you. 50 years, we'll have an answer for you. And this is the theory they call promissory materialism. It's a promise. I will reduce consciousness to matter. Anyway, so the idea is that it's like a body, not reducible to brain or brain states. Connected with the physical body, with a living body, with the nervous system and brain, no doubt, intimately connected. There is no doubt about it. Take a cup of coffee, you feel fresh. Take medicines, affects your mind. Mind is disturbed, it affects your body. So mind and body are deeply connected, intimately, there's no doubt about it. But they are not the same. So this subtle body was discovered. And this, where was it discovered? In every civilization. Every civilization. Wherever you felt that after the last rites of the departed person, you have rituals and prayers for the onward journey of that person. Every civilization and pre-modern civilizations, all of them, they have this insight that there's something out there which survives physical death. You might even say it's just a hope, but it's a hope grounded on solid reasoning. It's grounded on phenomenological reasoning, and you experience yourself. So this thing, how do you know? This is the reasoning. Just think about it. How do you know that when the physical body is dead, the person inside is dead? What I mean is, when we interact with a person, I'm talking to you or to him or to her, I don't think I'm talking with a body. I think I'm talking with a person. Right? And I say the person is alive, the person is here. When the body is dead, and that's what any doctor will tell you, any coroner will tell you, that the body is dead. Sorry. When the body is dead, there's a good way of keeping people awake. They'll tell you the body is dead, and we say that the person is dead. Do you see the sudden jump we are making? When I'm interacting with you, I'm saying with a person, I'm saying I'm interacting with a person, with the body, just with the body. No. But when the body dies, I say the person is dead. How do you know? What does the medical certificate say? Does it say the person is dead? No, it says the body is dead. They have nothing to say about the person. In between is that same logical jump, that the physical body, the person is nothing more than the physical body. But that's assuming a lot. And that's where the science of consciousness is stuck there. So this subtle body, there is no ground to believe that it's dead when the physical body dies. And every religion on earth, every primitive, so-called primitive, the aboriginal societies and tribes, they all had this understanding that the physical body, death of the physical body is not the end of life. And this subtle body goes on to other lives and other experiences. In Vedanta, this subtle body, if you ask what is it made of, just like the physical body, what is the subtle body? What is the physical body? Here, hands and feet and head and tummy and chest and organ systems and tissues and cells and this entire physiological processes which keep it alive. So what is the subtle body? What's it made of? What are its parts? In Vedanta, we say you can classify or you can analyze the subtle body into actually 19 parts. And they're all known. None of them are esoteric. None of them are speculative. They're all, when I tell you what they are, you will say, you can check them off one by one. You can see, yes, of course. What are the 19 parts? There are the 5 sense faculties. The ability to see, not the physical eyes. These are part of the physical body, but the power to see. The ability to see, ability to hear, to smell, to taste, to touch. 5 sense powers. Then the 5 motor organs, the ability to locomotion, moving around. The ability to grasp something, manipulate things, the physical, the hands and feet. The ability to talk, to speak. The ability and the powers of elimination of wastes and reproduction. There's motor organs, the 5 motor organs. So now we have 10. And then there are the 5 physiological functions, which I will not go into details. They're called the 5 pranas. They're basically physiological functions, breathing, and which takes care of the circulation of blood, the assimilation of food, and so on, which keeps this physical body alive. That is prana. One word for that is prana, and it has 5 components. So now you have 15. 5 motor organs, 5 sense organs, and 5 pranas. These are 15 parts of the subtle body. And then we come to what we most intimate to us: thought, emotion, memories, intellect, understanding, and finally the ego, the feeling of I within ourselves. Mana, buddhi, chitta, ahankar. Thoughts and emotions, the mind or manas. Memories, the storehouse, our likes and dislikes, past experiences, traumas, all of that. Chitta, storehouse. And then the buddhi, the intellect, the discriminative faculty, the one which enables us to say that, I get it. Or we screw up our face in puzzlement. I don't get it. What are you saying? That faculty of the mind. And finally, the ego, the one which says I. It's basically a coordinating, I would call it an appropriating function, which takes all the activities going on in the body and the mind and says, I. You're walking, and say, I walk. And talking, I talk. Want something, I want something. Remember, I remember. These are all functions of different parts of the subtle body. And the I says, I. And it's a coordinating function. It's called the ego, ahankara. 19. 5 sense organs, 5 motor organs, 5 physiological functions of prana, 15, and then mind, memory, intellect, ego, 19. This is the subtle body. What happens to it after death? Here we have speculations across the religious landscape that it goes from a physical body after the death of the physical body, it goes to other planes of existence, and has other experiences there, something like our dreams and nightmares, and then it gets embodied in a new body and comes back to life again. Could be a human body, could be some other body. It comes back. It's like data being downloaded from the cloud into a new machine. You had a machine, it got old, you discarded it, but you have backed up all your data. And now you get a new machine, and then you download it, and you continue working with it. Something like that. So this subtle body, it does not die with the death of the body. Why is all this happening? Why are we going from life to life, from body to body? What's the point of it all, and what's making it happen? So there you have another idea which is all pervasive in Indian thought. All pervasive in Indian thought. That is the idea of karma and reincarnation. You see that Indian thought is enormously diverse. Just consider Hinduism and Buddhism. Hinduism believes in God in various ways, and an eternal self, which we keep on talking about today in the memorial. We're talking about the self which does not change, does not die. And the Buddhists, they won't scoff, they're gentle people, but they will just roll their eyes. What eternal God? Where? What eternal self? So they have such enormously different approaches to spiritual life. And yet, my point is, this continuation of this subtle body from body to body to body, lifetime to lifetime to lifetime, this is an idea shared by all schools of Hindu thought, all schools of Buddhist thought, all schools of Jaina, and even much later, Sikhism. All of them believe in multiple lives, and what goes across multiple lives, it's a subtle body. Bodies change. We have had many, many bodies, many lifetimes. Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityu dhruvam janma mritasya cha. We read in the Gita today, Stephen's favorite chapter, 2nd chapter. It says, Krishna says to Arjuna, those who are born are bound to die. No exceptions. Life is 100% fatal. Those who are born are bound to die. But those who die are bound to be born again. That's not at all obvious to us. But this is a common assumption. It was sort of taken for granted, axiomatic, obvious to all kinds of, all shades of Indian thinkers. Here, of course, I'm making one notable exception, the Charvaka, the Lokaya, the materialist. There have been those all throughout. And they deny any subtle body or anything like that. They just say physical body and that's it. And that's, we should not deny it as being crude. We should not say that the materialists were crude. There were a range of materialists then, as there are now. So there are materialists now. I came across this new term, I was introduced to it. It's called Yolo. So apparently people take selfies and put it on Facebook or like social media, and they write YOLO. It means you only live once. What is the point of you only live once? So that you pack your life with as many activities as possible. 99.9% of them superficial and not worth doing. But because you live only once, therefore you must do it all and take care to put it on Facebook and Twitter and whatnot. That's always a given. And that's the meaning of YOLO. But recently I saw an article which said that the origin of this term, originally it's somebody from California who designed this term, no wonder. But But it meant the exact opposite. The idea was that because you only live once, you have to commit to something and make something of this life. Because you only live once, you cannot afford to, squander your days and hours in things which do not amount to much in the end. So there were these materialists, but even now there are materialists of very sophisticated, shades of materialism. You have, someone like Richard Dawkins or Christopher Hitchens or Sam Harris. So the scientific materialism, which is very sophisticated also. So there's a whole range of materialists. But other than them, just about every other school of philosophy believed or held on to that the subtle body is there and it continues and it goes through life after life. So it was common across the board, every one of them. And why is this happening? Life after life after life. What determines it? Why are lives different? Why do we get these different experiences? So behind everything, again, an assumption, pre-assumption, axiomatic, shared by all schools of Indian thought, karma. What is karma? To put it very simply, it's cause and effect. It's not something weird. It's something that's sort of natural to all of us. Anybody who thinks in terms of cause and effect. It's dry. Why? Oh, it didn't rain. It's wet in New York. Why? Oh, it rained. Cause and effect. So this cause and effect, if you extend it a little further, this becomes the whole theory of karma. I'll call it a theory because it's not a proven fact. It's not, you've gone a few steps beyond what a scientist would accept. But it just means that it's applying the law of causality to our moral life. So if you do good, the result is something pleasant. Something pleasant, something good will happen to you in a future life. If you're especially naughty, then something bad, miserable, painful will happen to you in some future existence. If it's really powerful, good or bad, it might even happen in this life. But generally, this whole developed form of karma, which is accepted by most Hindu schools and most Buddhist and Jain schools, would say that every life we've got, every life means every body that we are issued from the general store up there, it comes with its own load of karma. A part of our stock of karma, we have an enormous stock of karma built up through a beginningless time. And that part of that stock of karma is exhausted in one particular life. A little bit of that karma, a slice of it, has produced this body, given us our parents, given us our talents and problems and issues in life, and sort of generally drawn a kind of a canvas on which our life will be painted. Not that everything is determined for us, just the broad parameters. Then you play the game of life as best as you can, as long as age, birth and death determined because of that slice of karma. And that's why in this life also we do things, and that adds to our stock of karma, and we go on into future lives. So that's the idea of reincarnation. How long has this been going on? Beginningless time, we don't know. How long will this go on? Endless, until, here comes something interesting. This, you will notice, is not a very satisfactory kind of solution. It's a kind of immortality. We, after all, are not dying with the death of the body. We are not born with the birth of the body. The body is born and we are embodied in the body. But we are subtle bodies, which have come from ancient past. We come with our own karma. We go through this life, and when this body drops off, we still continue. We turn the page of life and go on. But this is not a very desirable kind of immortality. If you think about it, in Indian thought, all schools of Indian thought, except the materialist, all schools of Indian thought, they say this is the problem, it's not an answer. Why is this a problem? What kind of immortality would it be if you have to die again and again and again? If you died once, you would have been done, okay, it's unpleasant, but it's over. Now I'm nicely dead. But no, that's just one of an n number of deaths. There are many, many more waiting for you. Now that's not a very good situation to be in. There was this cartoon I remember which showed an American person talking to an Indian person. The American person says, "I'm a born-again Christian. And the Hindu says, oh, I'm a born again and again and again and again Hindu. But that's not a good thing. That is the problem in Indian thought, and that is to be solved by spirituality. Now, I haven't started actually, so I'm almost out of time, but here is what I was driving towards in all of this. What they found was that beyond this, notice I used the word subtle body. I used physical body. I am embodied in a physical body. I said subtle body. I did not say I am that subtle body. I said that's also a body. My real nature, your real nature, our real nature is not the physical body, is not the subtle body, is a reality beyond the physical body and subtle body, which is not subject to death. It is the subtle body which goes from lifetime to lifetime. It's physical body which dies in each life. But that reality beyond subtle body, beyond the physical body, which we might call this capital S self, that's what you really are. That's what I really am. It's physical body, and subtle bodies are like changing your overcoat and your shirt. You are not the overcoat. You are not the shirt either. The physical body dies in each lifetime, and the subtle body continuously changes. It's continuously changing. That self beyond the body and the physical and subtle body is what the Upanishadic saying, I'm going back to where I started. Vedaham Purusham Mahantam. I have known that infinite being which is beyond darkness, beyond death, being full of radiance. That is the Atman. The exact nature of that Atman, again, there's a lot of debate. What is it? Is it different for each person? So do we all have different Atmans? Or is it one reality? Is it a substance or is it not a substance? Is it pure awareness, pure being? All of these things, we'll talk about it tomorrow, so you can come to be continued tomorrow. But this is the nature of the Atman. So now we have a trichotomous view of the human personality. Physical body, subtle body, and Atman, which means literally simply it means the self, capital S self. That's what you are. That does not come and go. That is, according to Advaita Vedanta, it's one reality. We are all one Atman. Many physical bodies, many subtle bodies, and that's why we feel we are different beings. In the Gita, Sri Krishna says, Avibhaktam cha bhuteshu, undivided in all beings, in billions of beings, human and non-human, undivided. Vibhaktam eva vastitam, that appears to be divided. Why appears to be divided? Because many bodies, many subtle bodies. So that is that discovery in the Indian systems solve the mystery of life. That actually we are that. And we are going through this process of spiritual evolution. And the evolution is in terms of the body and evolution in terms of the subtle body until we realize who or what we truly are. Once we realize that, then we are set free from this cycle of birth and death, and that is true immortality. There is no other way out of mortality other than that knowledge which tells us, which shows us what we are. Once we know the answer to the question, who am I? What am I? Then we are set free from this cycle of birth and death. We attain to true immortality. This is called moksha. There are many, many words in Indian philosophy for this. Moksha means freedom. Freedom from what? Freedom from this cycle of birth and death. At this point, one might say, oh, that's some Indian thing, suppose I don't believe in the cycle of birth and death. I just see this one life. Where are many lives, many births and deaths? I see one life and I accept, yes, there'll be one death. Then how does it help me? Aren't you giving me a solution to an unreal problem? Like there's a story in the old Wild West. What they call them, the snake oil dealers. So he was arrested, and the magistrate, the judge, sentenced him for selling real cures to unreal diseases and unreal cures to real diseases. So, aren't you selling me snake oil, births and deaths? It sounds like an awful thing, but where is this cycle of births and deaths? So you can reduce the whole thing to something simpler, which is universal. Everybody will agree to it. It's a solution to suffering. It's on a cosmic, on a vast scale, it's multiple lives and births and deaths. But just in this one canvas of one life, it's still this realization of what we are at the deepest possible level. It gives us an answer to our existential problem, the deepest philosophical solution to suffering. It shows us there is at our core of our existence our real nature, which is beyond suffering. So that is mukti or moksha or freedom. Once you realize that, the Upanishads say this cycle of birth and death stops. Not just the Upanishads. Every Indian philosophy says this. There are various ideas in which this mukti or freedom, moksha is put. Many words are used. Mukti is another word. Literally means freedom. The materialist, of course, would say the death of the body is moksha, freedom. There's nothing more beyond that. But the Buddhist says the negative, the desire and the negative tendencies, they continue in the subtle body, lifetime after lifetime, generating new karma, propelling new births and deaths. So when those are purified, then that series comes to an end. It is extinguished literally. It's called Nirvana. Nirvana means the extinction, extinguishing it. That was one of the earliest Buddhist ideas of freedom. But then the question would be, if it's extinction, then who's free? So it was developed much further later on. The idea became that it's a stream of consciousness. The negative defilements are purified, but then the pure stream of consciousness continues. So that's what you would call a Buddha or an Arhat. There are many distinctions. So I think Uma Vidya is looking at me quizzically. Yeah, so I'm painting with a very broad brush here. Jainism says that no, it's not just a stream of consciousness and discrete, different streams, flashes of consciousness, Yogachara. The Jainism would say, no, there is one consciousness, one self, and that becomes purified of karma, and they use a space analogy. It rises to the top of the universe, and it is free, it becomes omniscient. The dualistic schools say there is God, all perfect, and in freedom, we are all individual beings, Atmans, and we go and stay with God in a perfect realm, heaven, and enjoy bliss, and you're never born again. And there are different kinds of freedoms there. We won't go into that. There's a dualistic approach. The Sankhyan philosopher, where is Sankhya? Oh, she's outside. The Sankhyan philosopher says that, no. The pure consciousness remains by itself. When it is mixed up with matter, it's in bondage. When it sees its separation from matter. That is the liberating knowledge. That is called kaivalya, the magnificent isolation, aloneness. That's also freedom. Never is birth and death anymore for that. The Sankhyan and the Yoga philosopher. The Advaitin, and I'll end with this. The Advaita philosopher says, you never had bondage. Never was there birth for you, nor was there death for you. You, the infinite awareness, empty like space. It's like empty space filled with sunlight. It's a Buddhist metaphor used. You're like pure, you're like light. And in you, in you appears this universe. And this series of bodies and minds. They are nothing actually separate from you. It's one unrestricted, unlimited awareness, like space, being awareness, existence, consciousness. I know these are, it sounds very speculative, but we'll go deeper into it tomorrow. And this one has always been, to our point, this one has always been free. It never entered into life as a body. It never was born, never died, never was in the cycle of birth and death. It always was immortal. So that liberating knowledge is to know our immortal nature, that we already are this. Advaita says, after enlightenment, what do we realize? Do we realize that, we had this cycle of birth and death, and now I am free of it. It has come to, that horrible thing has come to a stop. No. You realize, I never really had that cycle of birth and death. It's more of the nature of a nightmare. So I always was what I am. That reality is always there. And that reality is what all of us are, one reality. That is the Advaitic idea. The basic idea is moksha. Immortality is our very nature. The prayer we started with, Asato ma sadgamaya, lead us from this appearance to the reality. What is the appearance? This. What is the reality? One existence consciousness, one being light, Sat Chit, unlimited. And how do you do that? Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, lead us from darkness unto light. This is from the darkness of ignorance to the light of knowledge. What are we doing? Going from the unreal, from the appearance to reality. How do you go from appearance to reality? You can't drive there. You can't buy it at the store. How do you go there? You go there only by knowledge. So from darkness of ignorance to the light of knowledge. And what's the result of all of that? Mrityu ma amritam gamaya. Lead us not to death, but to immortality. The result is immortality. It's a result which is already there. It's not produced. It becomes clear. It becomes apparent. The movie screen thought it was terrible. Why do I have to undergo this tragedy? And a repeated tragedy. And then it realizes, I am the movie screen. The tragedy was a movie. You can play as many tragedies as you like, as many comedies as you like. It makes no difference to me, the movie screen. The movie screen made it possible to have those tragedies and the comedies. But they are movies. The difference between the movie and the screen. The screen is not affected by the movie when the difference is clear. That is Advaitic moksha. That's why Swami Vivekananda, when he chants that quote, I'll end where I started. Listen, ye children of immortal bliss. And he says, I have realized that infinite being. By knowing, which is radiant like the sun, and beyond death, by knowing which you go beyond death. Now think about it. By knowing something immortal, how do I become immortal? By knowing a clock, I don't become a clock. By knowing a table, luckily I don't become a table. So by knowing something immortal, how do I become immortal? Only in one case, if I am already that, I did not know it somehow. I realize that, and that is Advaitic liberation, moksha. That is immortality from the non-dualistic perspective. But more of that tomorrow. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Rama Krishna Arpanam.